Hello, everyone. It won't be really much a workshop. It's more of a presentation, but I think we can turn it into a little bit interactive. Yeah, we'll see. So basically, I'm going to be talking about how you can contribute to the Polkadot SDK. For a little bit of perspective, this is the first time I've made a presentation that covers this content. To be honest, it was a little bit difficult. You know, I've been working in Polkadot for like 5, 6, not quite 6 years, but more than 5 years now. And you know, trying to remember what it was like on day 0 is quite difficult. You know, like what I knew, what I didn't know, how to navigate. This presentation is supposed to be trying to address someone who maybe is the first time trying to contribute to an open source repo, working in blockchain, working with Rust, and how they can actually go from that kind of like crazy unknown to actually making their first PR and contributing to Polkadot, right? Maybe perhaps joining the fellowship at some point, right? I think we can make this a little bit interactive. Throughout my presentation, if you find yourself as someone who wants to contribute, or if you find yourself as someone who has contributed, and you have something you want to ask or some comment you want to say to add to my slides, keep that in mind, and maybe at the end we can have some open talk about what questions you still have or what other things I might have missed. But that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of what we're going to cover today. Does that sound good? All right. So prerequisite knowledge. Polkadot, it's definitely not the first starting point, I think, for the blockchain journey, right? Like we're on a 3rd generation blockchain. We have an intense code base here. There's a lot of stuff you need to know ahead of time. And the truth is, if this is your first time touching blockchain Rust at all, Polkadot is probably not going to be the best place for you to start. But it doesn't mean that you can't get there. So, kind of the prerequisite knowledge you need to really, I think, get started to contribute to Polkadot and Polkadot SDK is a mid-level Rust fluency, right? So this is around the first 11 chapters of Rust. It's like types and generics and tests and all that kind of stuff, and of course the borrow and all that kind of stuff. A mid-level understanding of blockchain, so you should know how we got to where we are today. So basically, if you understand the journey all the way from Bitcoin to Ethereum, I think you can understand now where we're building. And then, of course, a basic understanding of Polkadot, like what are we actually doing and how are we changing and making improvements to scale the space, right? But I really think you need to start with this in mind. Otherwise, the repo and the stuff is not going to make sense to you. It's not going to be something that you can really jump into and understand like the context into what you're trying to build. Does that make sense? Now, of course, there are parts of Polkadot you can contribute to without having this full understanding, but I think if you really want to develop yourself to be a contributor to the Polkadot SDK, you need to be at this point, okay? And what's great is we actually have a lot of resources available for you to actually get to that point. So I recently worked on a tutorial that's hosted on .code School, which will try to teach you Rust in the context of Substrate. So if you're still like trying to break into Rust at all and understand how frameworks and how all these different types and stuff work, for Substrate, this is a great tutorial. You can go to .codeschool.com. And of course, to get to that, like the next level of understanding, we have the Polkadot Blockchain Academy. And this is like a almost free academy that we have. We've done 4 global cohorts. We're going to do the 5th one in Singapore this May. Unfortunately, the academy applications for this Singapore one is closed, but you should keep in mind because we're going to have another one for sure soon after. But we've done 4 global cohorts. It's a 5-week in-person program. We cover 8 modules from cryptography, game theory, economics, blockchain, smart contracts, Polkadot, XCM. We cover the whole breadth of detail, and we're really trying to set up people to be able to contribute to Polkadot. That's exactly the goal of this academy. We have about 1,000 applicants per cohort. 90 students actually make it in from the application process. 50 graduate, and about 20 of them get hired every single cohort, right, into either Parity or a Parachain team. It's a really awesome platform to get in. We have some people, I think, in this room who came from the academy. I think I've met a lot of people here who've actually joined Parachain team. So this is a really awesome place to start to get that base level understanding. But I think the audience I'm trying to address here is, I just graduated from the Blockchain Academy. I have this prerequisite knowledge. Now what, right? What do I do? I've just built this thing. How do I actually start contributing? And this is quite a hard question. And so I'm trying to see the best I can to actually introduce that to you all, okay? So let's first talk about the Polkadot SDK, kind of what the lay of the land is, right? So since the last Sub-Zero event, actually, Polkadot SDK has evolved quite a bit. I mean, I'm trying to avoid using the word Substrate as much as I can, because Substrate is now just a part of this overall SDK that we're trying to work with, right? But what you've seen since the last Sub-Zero event is that we've actually merged things into a monorepo and actually moved some things out as well. So let's take a look at that. First, the monorepo. So for as long as I was working in Parity, we always had these 3 repos: Substrate, Polkadot, and Cumulus. And we were always working across these 3 different repos. The challenge was that when you work across 3 repos, and they were kind of tightly coupled, you had all these kinds of like Git magic things you had to do. Like basically, one of the main things was the companion PR. So if I make a change to Substrate, and Polkadot and Cumulus is based on Substrate, and it's some kind of breaking change, I need to make changes to those other repos as well, right? And this has been actually a really kind of a big blocker and a big pain point for actually agile developing Substrate, Polkadot, and Cumulus, the whole SDK. So recently, they merged these repos together into one in order to kind of improve that collaboration, and as I understand, to also try to help efforts with trying to make these libraries more publicly available. My understanding is that it may not be that Polkadot SDK is always going to be merged like this, but this is one of the things we did, just try to make contributing that much easier, right? So when you're making a change to Substrate, you don't have to all of a sudden be bombarded, hey, did you make this change to Polkadot and Cumulus as well, right? You can just work in one repo, and if it all compiles, you're good, okay? But also, as a part of this process, we also ejected or extracted some of the code too. And this is the runtimes for the various blockchains. As you might know, we have a lot of different blockchains in our ecosystem. We have the relay chains like Polkadot and Kusama, and for each of them, we have system chains like the Asset Hub, Bridges Hub, Collectives chain, etc. And so these were actually also taken out of the main Polkadot SDK repo because, the SDK should be a library for building these things. These are the actual tangible products we built with them, right? And the reason why I talk about these 2 different repos here is because the ownership of them is actually also very important when you want to contribute, right? When you're contributing to these repos, you need to understand how you're navigating and who you're talking to actually get things in, right? The Polkadot SDK is a repo owned by Parity Technologies, right? It is an open source, free-to-use public repo, but in fact, it is not itself Polkadot, right? It is an SDK for building Polkadot, and it is influenced and designed and ultimately, owned by and controlled by Parity, right? And so when you're going and actually trying to make changes to Polkadot SDK, you need to work with them and work with their engineers and their architecture and long-term vision to actually make contributions. We ejected the runtime out because the runtimes, Polkadot itself, Kusama itself, these different asset parachains or these different subsystem parachains, they are not owned by Parity. These are things owned by the dot holder, right? And actually, dot holders control these things via this fellowship, which I'll talk about next. But again, it's important to realize then that when you're trying to make changes to Polkadot itself, not the SDK, but you want to, for example, change what the fees are on Polkadot, you don't go to Parity for that. Right? Parity doesn't control that. You need to go to the dot holders. You need to go to the broader network to actually go and contribute those changes, right? So when you're coming to contribute to Polkadot as a whole, you need to think about who you're navigating, who you're talking to, and who you're working with, right? And it can be difficult at times. Going more into again this idea of fellowship, I'll talk more about the fellowship next, but obviously, working with Parity, an organization, that's one kind of pathway to actually just talk with them, talk with their engineers, get some idea through, and get it approved. When you want to get an idea approved by the network, how do you do that? Well, we have this RFC process. So in the fellowship repo, which I'll talk about next, we have these RFCs where basically you can make proposals for different kinds of changes to the network itself, right? These will go and get reviewed by the fellowship, right? They'll provide feedback, and they might actually even implement and actually push forward these RFCs if there isn't someone there to actually build it, right? So maybe you are in the ecosystem, and you have an idea, or you heard from some other ecosystem, some idea that you want to bring to Polkadot, right? You can actually, even without being a developer, bring those ideas, make it into a nice RFC that obviously is well-researched, well-written, and then present that to this repo, the RFC repo, and maybe you'll get approved and actually stewarded into the ecosystem, right? But again, the navigating, we work in a decentralized space. You can't just go to someone and say, hey, merge this PR, right? In the Polkadot world, you have to appeal to the network, the dot holders, right? And this is the process we have for that. So again, just going back, when you're actually trying to make contributions to Polkadot and the SDK, you need to know where you're navigating and who owns those repos, right? Who kind of navigates and actually makes the decisions for what's getting pushed forward. All right. So let's talk about the fellowship. The fellowship I already mentioned here is kind of owning the Polkadot network itself, right? Or at least stewarding along and representing the dot holders. So the fellowship is a technical organization that stewards the development of the Polkadot network, right? They are composed of core developers and researchers who have already contributed, and ultimately they are servants to the dot holders, right? So dot holders are the ones who actually control what the fellowship works on, focuses on, and does, and they signal this via referendums, If you want to learn more about the fellowship, there is a nice long manifesto written by Gav that was approved by the whole network on how you actually, like what the fellowship does, what its responsibilities are, how you navigate through it. This is a very important part. If you want to be part of the fellowship, you need to read this and kind of understand the main mission of what we're trying to do here. But ultimately, again, trying to be a technical stewards of the Polkadot network. Just want to do a screenshot. This is the current fellowship. You see there's 76 members. Some of them are, again, past the cut line here, but you can see I'm also part of the fellowship. You have a lot of names you might recognize and people you might find around here in Sub-Zero. And then you can see here, actually back here, that all these different fellows, they have ranks here. That's the numbers next to their names. And the high-level thing you have here is the fellowship is composed of, it's a ranked organization where your rank is basically attributed to like your skill and knowledge and contributions to the Polkadot network, right? And so as you go through here, you can see there is an estimated amount of time it takes for you to develop the skills to reach a certain rank. It's about 1 year per rank. And you can see here you also get paid to be part of the fellowship. There's a passive salary that you make when you're in the fellowship. Think of it like very much like your job is working for Polkadot, right? So you can see also here, like the fellowship is not something that you can just jump into at the very end. Currently, the highest ranked person, even Gav himself, is only rank 6, right? He's prepared. Like this fellowship is prepared for tens of years, like decades of work to actually get to the final ranks. And of course, there are different missions and ideas and ways to navigate this process, right? And you can see here the salary factor here for the fellowship is actually is based on the OECD, which is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, their average salary for the countries in this organization. So as the years progress and inflation happens or salary prices change, we will update the salaries. So basically here you can see at level 3, you should expect to get the basic average salary for an engineer in these OECD countries. That makes sense? And again, as it develops, it'll change. Cool. So I wanted to just show an example of the requirements to become Dan 1, that first rank inside of the fellowship. You need 3 clear examples of modest but substantial contributions to protocol development, actively been involved in the design and component deployed to the network, substantially assisted in the analysis or authoring or of formalization or implementation of protocol component, should be able to list all key goals, principles, tenets of Polkadot's overall philosophy. An example of a modest or substantial contribution could be identifying and correcting a non-trivial issue in the protocol code of formalization, being available and playing a crucial role, an operational role for the network fix, proposing reasonable, non-trivial protocol innovation, doing valuable, innovative, insightful refactoring simplification. And if you're like me, this is your face. This is rank 1 in the fellowship. It's intense, and it's meant to be, okay? So I wanted to clarify what the fellowship is, okay? First, the fellowship is a very new and still developing organization, right? It is, even I'm part of it. I don't know all of it, how it works, right, yet. It's still being developed. And this is one of the chaotic parts of building decentralized organizations, right? Like, of course, we would love to have some person come and say, it's like this and this and this. We have a CEO, go to this manager, do all that. No, okay? We want to develop resilient decentralized organizations that are also flexible, that can change over time, right? That means that there's always going to be initial non-clarity. But the manifesto is there, it has some ideas, and we need to work together as a group to make it better for everyone, right? The fellowship offers some technical influence over the Polkadot network, right? And a regular income, right? A regular income, like a job, right? It is attempting to provide, you can already get paid by Polkadot. They have treasury proposals, right? So why do we need the fellowship as well? It's trying to provide this human aspect, right? Like people who build on Polkadot may need to go to maternity leave, right? Might have a child. They might need to take a break. It shouldn't be that because you're taking a break that all of a sudden you're just not making money anymore. That we understand that Polkadot and that salaries are an important part of being a human, right? And so that's what the fellowship is trying to offer. But because of that, right? Because of the kind of gamification or how you could take advantage of that passive salary, the barrier to access the fellowship is also very high, right? If you want to be part of this decentralized organization, just make a passive, not passive, but like an income that can allow you to take breaks and have a child and do that kind of stuff. You need to be able to really pass this barrier of like a Sybil resistance, right? And so we have these really hard requirements, and I think that's the right place to be. I want to also note that you do not need to be part of the fellowship to contribute to Polkadot SDK, right? And the fellowship is not the path for everyone. You can be a developer working on other things. Fellowship might not be right for you. At least this fellowship isn't, right? So if you actually read the manifesto, there's a list of things that the fellowship is responsible for. And there are definitely ways to contribute, even as an engineer, outside of that list. And that might mean that you're not the right fit for this fellowship. And that's okay. This is just one path forward. It's allowing one set of people who actually fit this criteria to get this human income, okay? I hope we're there. So my recommended path for becoming a fellow, if this is the right path for you, okay? And again, this is not the path. It's just my feeling at the moment. If you should join a team in the Polkadot or the broader ecosystem. That's Parity, a parachain team, even another blockchain team. Who cares? They have to be aligned with the values of the fellowship. Understand kind of what the fellowship is trying to achieve, right? You should work with them and communicate with them how you want to split their time, right? You're working for a business. They're paying you a full income, but you want to say, hey, I'm going to work for you 80%, and I'm going to contribute to Polkadot 20%, right? That's great. If you have a team that's really aligned with the fellowship, they should love that. They should love that they're training a fellow in their organization. They have a fellow represented in their org, right? You should navigate your way to level 3. And if you remember, we go back to the salaries here. You're not making a living salary until you hit level 3 anyway, right? So you need to have another job, basically, to actually, to pay yourself and to eat and to have a house. So not until level 3 do you have that full-time salary. So work inside this organization, learn from them, and learn from the community. Learn what it takes to be in the community. It's going to probably take around 3 years. And then you can finally achieve that full salary. And then only if you want. You don't have to, but if you want, you can transition to become a full-time Polkadot fellow, right? Decentralize yourself. But this is just one pathway forward. But I think the mistake is people want to start their job being in the fellowship, or their journey in Polkadot being in the fellowship. I think that's the wrong thing. You need someone or organization to help steward you and mentor you. And I think it's really the right path forward, okay? Great. Okay, so now we talked about the fellowship. We talked about some general navigation. Now you actually want to start contributing and actually start building your pathway forward in the fellowship, right? So for that, you need to find some issues and ideas to work on, right? Before you can contribute, you need to find an issue. Let's get out of the way a common mistake. The common mistake in the Polkadot ecosystem that I've seen, or just maybe any open source ecosystem, is you come into some repo with your own ideas. I want to build some new feature. Take it. On a million ways, this is terrible. First, you're coming as someone who has very little experience working in that organization, understanding what their plans are, their roadmap is, how the architecture of that platform is, and you want to just add something to it. Not to mention that Polkadot and other repos are huge repos. You want to add more code that someone else has to maintain at some point, right? Like you've committed it, and now someone else has to maintain it and migrate it and handle it. It's just not nice, right? So really, as a new contributor in the ecosystem, what you really want to do is you want to trust the context and the existing issues that are there by the experts, right? It is much better for you to go in there with a fresh mind, blank slate, and say, hey, give me your top-of-mind issues, tell me what I should work on, and then work on it. Keep your ideas in your head. Allow them to evolve as you learn and understand better the platform. And then once you actually have a grasp of what is needed and the priority and you already contributed before, then start bringing them in. Again, I do not want to say, don't have ideas, stop thinking. That's terrible. But you can understand there's a right point where you stop absorbing and you start contributing back in the idea mindset. That makes sense? So it's usually not a good idea for your first thing to just come in, hey, here's a feature, right? It's going to be very hard. Okay, so let's find the right issue among issues that exist already, right? And I want to say that not all issues are created equal. So here are some of the ways that I would have you evaluate an issue. And again, I understand it can be difficult to, as someone who's new to the Polkadot ecosystem to even qualify an issue with these different topics, but ideally we have tags and stuff like that. We'll walk through that. But first, you want to think about the difficulty of an issue, right? Obviously, you're a new contributor. You can't build CoreJam. You're probably not going to take Gav's spec and then write the whole program. You need to find easy issues, things that are entry level, things that don't touch a lot of code, and that you can actually jump into as an early contributor, right? Then the sensitivity. Polkadot and the Polkadot SDK manages billions of dollars of value. You cannot touch code on day one, which is going to affect that, right? Like a PR to the balances palette is probably not best first place to go, right? It's like this is really scary stuff. If you make an error, you make a mistake, you can brick and hurt a lot of the ecosystem, right? So you need to look for places in the code base and issues that touch things that are kind of, again, does it affect the overall network? So this is like tests and benchmarks and other kinds of, maybe like developer experience improvements, that kind of stuff, right? Those are great places to start. Low sensitivity, right? That even if something went wrong, not a big deal to the billions of dollars of our network, right? Clarity, right? This is a fault of coming from our side as core engineers of Polkadot. We often have in our head an issue or a problem, and in order to make sure it gets written down, we write it down, but we don't write down all the details of exactly how it's going to be solved. And sometimes we don't even have all the answers ourselves, right? So when looking for an issue, you really want one where the solution is very clear, right? You don't want one where you have to, in the top of learning how to contribute to Polkadot, come up with a solution itself, right? You want to find one where like, this is what you have to do step by step by step, this is how you do it, right? So you want to look for the clarity of the issue. Now, some issues may not have clarity in the issue itself, but you may be able to talk to the issue owner and ask them, hey, do you have more you can write down on the step-by-step of that? And that would be something that you can get clarity for. But definitely you want to look for one with high clarity. And then urgency. So this is something in the middle, right? If you find a PR which is very urgent, for example, Polkadot is down, we need to fix this thing. Probably you don't want to work on that, because probably someone else is going to work on that much faster than you, and there's a lot of internal organization. Similarly, if you find a PR like, we're not really, this is an idea, but it's not so urgent, there's a lot of other things we're worried about, you might not get someone to review your code, right? So you need to find something where it's like, it's relevant for the current work being done, but not something that will be blocked by you, or that you'll be blocked by others to review, right? So this is kind of, I think when you pick up an issue, try in your head to imagine what these different, how it qualifies in these different categories, and then see, is this the right issue to pick, right? And so some of the ways we can help you identify those things is we have also labels. So we have labels here like C1 mentor, C2 good first issue, D0 easy. So you can actually go to the Polkadot SDK, go to the issues, filter by these labels, and find things where you have someone who's willing to mentor you, you have one which is a very good first issue, or the level of the issue is an easy thing. And we also have easy, medium, hard, like there's different kinds of categorization. So go take a look at the different labels here. But this is how we can we've identified for you some of these categorizations, right? So I'm going to give a couple examples here. So here's a great non-sensitive entry point into the runtime. So again, the runtime is a place where most of you probably are learning to develop. But it's a very sensitive place to touch, because if you do something in the runtime, it could potentially, and especially in the Polkadot SDK, it can affect all the parachains out in the ecosystem, right? Especially things like XCM. So here, we have XCM regression tests, right? We have too many breaking changes in XCM. It'll be good to create some tests where here are the steps. Create a script to collect top 20 unique XCMs from live on-chain data. For each usage, write a test for it using XCM Simulator or Chopsticks. Rerun the script every 3 months to identify. So here, this is perfect qualification. One, it's low sensitivity, right? You write a test, and if the test is wrong, it's not going to affect anyone, right? It's going to, we get it reviewed, but this is not a high sensitivity issue, right? That it's urgent, or urgent enough that, it's very relevant for today. We're seeing XCM changing a lot, affecting parachain teams. They want this, right? The steps are clear, exactly the clarity on how we do it. And the difficulty is not that high, because, you kind of control the tests that you're writing here, right? You can basically understand the end-to-end scenario and write that test. So it's not you have to make up the scenario yourself. You're looking for on-chain data and actually just recreating those scenarios in person, right? So, but obviously it does require a little bit of knowledge of Polkadot, blockchain, Rust, right? Here's another great issue. Not possible to implement at least 32-bit for a signed number. And by the way, both of these issues are live today. So if you want to do it, you can do it after this talk, right? Here, they basically want to manipulate so that some types, some traits, implement different kinds of traits here. So basically, they want to be able to implement this trait, at least 32-bit, for a signed number, which currently doesn't work, right? The reason this issue is great is, one, it's not very blockchain heavy, so maybe you're still learning about blockchain, it's not really important. And second is that if the Rust compiler can compile your code, you probably did it right. I mean, this is one of the powerful things about Rust. As a person who reviews a lot of Rust code, I already have in my brain like such a lower weight, knowing that Rust handles automatically all of these different sensitivity and type checks and strictness for me. So if the CI passes, and the code looks generally right, it's probably good. So this is one of those things where, again, you don't have to worry too much about implementation detail or like the really nitty-gritty of exactly how I'm going to do it. That if you can understand this issue and make it compile, you probably did it right. So these are great kind of, again, in the mindset of these different categorizations, great ways to identify great issues to tackle, right? Okay, and then more. When you're picking issues, it's not great to jump around to all the different places of the code space. Maybe at the beginning you want to just get a feeling for what's going on, but really as someone who's potentially mentoring you, I want to mentor you deep. I want to get you going from just doing small PRs to actually owning larger features, right? And so it's really important when you're picking issues to try to become a subject expert and eventually a code owner, right? So we want to see you consistently contributing to a specific part of the code base, becoming more and more familiar with it, identifying for yourself issues and improvements, right? And actually then become a self-starter for actually owning that code and actually pushing it forward. You do not want to perpetually be an issue finder. You want to, at some point, be an issue creator and finisher yourself, right? And so when I'm going and actually teaching someone and trying to navigate them as a mentor in the code base, I really am looking for them to own something. And one of the things I ask them is, what are you most interested in doing, right? What are you most interested in learning about in the blockchain space? And finding them a spot for that. Another one, when you're looking at issues and you're discussing exactly what you're going to do, obviously this is all before you start implementing stuff, you want to keep conversations in public. Now, one of the natural tendencies in the space is, oh, there's an issue, there's some guy, I'm going to DM him, see what I can do, right? And you have this long conversation back and forth, talking. And then guess what happens? Maybe you don't pick that issue, maybe it wasn't the right level for you, and all that information is lost. It's dead. And the next guy who wants to contribute has to do the same thing. And from me as as someone who's helping and teaching and explaining my issue, I should, of course, bring that information out. But you, as someone who wants to contribute, can also help by basically keeping these conversations in public spaces. On the GitHub issue itself, on the forum, have these public conversations so that you can actually spread information about what is needed, what is being built, and etc., right? And you have to understand the culture of Polkadot is global and async. We are here in Thailand. We are coming from all around the world, right? Like literally everyone around the world is coming here and talking. So you need to understand that when you try to open a DM with someone, you might be catching them at lunchtime, dinner, in the middle of the night. It's much better to work in an async manner, create these long-form messages, force yourself to think about what you actually want to say, what someone actually wants to answer, and have all that be in the public space. And you'd be surprised, again, like how many of you often lurk these issues and read these issues to actually develop your own knowledge of the space, right? So that information being out there, you are already increasing how much easier it is for other people to contribute to Polkadot as well, right? Avoid DMs. I think actually you'll see actually in Parity and in Polkadot, a lot of people have that asynchronous tag to their name, right? That's the signal. Hey, talk to me via GitHub. Talk to me via the forum, right? Great. So now you've identified and found an issue. You've been talking about it in a public space. You've picked one that's good. Now let's actually go through what it looks like to make a good pull request and do a review, right? So first, the number one turnoff for me to help a new contributor in Polkadot is when I see that they have a giant PR. Like, you're brand new to the space. I need to first even evaluate what level of knowledge you have. Like, for example, if Basti came and gave me a 1,000 or 100,000 line PR, I already know at what level he understands Polkadot, right? I can skip a lot of the basics. But you as a new contributor, I don't even know if you know Rust. I don't even know if you understand the basics of the system, right? So when I'm seeing a huge PR, especially at the beginning, I need to really look deeply and closely at it. Large PRs are a big turnoff. Now, ideally, easy issues shouldn't have large PRs, right? But in general, when you're building PRs, it's great to break things down, right? So one of the things I like to do is, again, take advantage of the Rust compiler. For many issues, you can probably break it down to 2 steps. One is introducing new types, traits, and other Rust things, which are all like statically compiled and kind of like, if it compiles, it works. And then another commit or PR, which is the actual logic changes. It actually uses these new types, uses these new traits, and that's the one that really is more important to look at. So basically here on the first PR with type-sensitive changes that can all be checked by Rust, I just check, do you have the right stylization or the right kind of standards for writing Rust, but I don't have to think too deeply about, is this going to break Polkadot? But then here, I really think deeply about what code are you writing, how are you using these new types, and what logic you're building. And this will allow me to separate those two things and allow me to review your code more easily, right? And of course, you can chain dependencies. So like this can either be done in different commits, so your commits can tell a story, or even two PRs, where one PR points to the head of the other PR, right? Yeah, and then of course, where you're factoring many components, like there's many issues inside a frame where we need to like update all the palettes. So like one of the issues in the past was like we need all palettes to use the new weights, right? You don't want to make one PR where you're updating, 50 palettes in one PR. That's like, thousands of lines of code. It's a lot of redundancy. It's better to actually tackle it one by one. Make a PR for one palette, make the change, push it, commit, move on to the next one. That's really, it's better, okay? Then, of course, I think it goes without saying, write tests. But I think you'd be surprised, how many, so writing tests is obvious, especially if you're a developer from any other space. But I think you'd be surprised how even the most trivial changes could use a test. And I'll show you actually my first PR and how I could have done better. But one of the things I think is really nice is, tests are kind of like, in most cases, free. And in the blockchain environment, tests are super important. They establish assumptions, and if some other part of the code base changes, which changes those assumptions, the tests fail. Like, tests are a really great way to make sure that everything is working as expected. And again, with these blockchain systems, with how complex they are, no one person can have in their mind all the assumptions across all the code base, right? So more tests, more code coverage is always better. And one of the things I want to encourage is that you are someone who's learning about Polkadot. You might have questions which you can answer yourself by writing a test. And you should do that, and you should commit that to Polkadot. That those kinds of things, if you say, okay, I think this palette works in this way, I'm not sure if in this case it does this or this, write a test, see the result, see if it makes sense, and commit it back. You can actually leave the repo with more code coverage than before, right? That's a good thing to do. But also, if you do that, going back to this last one, break down the PR. You shouldn't have your idea and this random test also be in the PR. Make a separate PR that says, hey, I'm adding more tests to this behavior, and then another PR saying, here's a new feature. Does that make sense? Like, you want to eliminate so that when someone reviewing your code doesn't say, oh, your test is kind of messed up, so I can't introduce this, whatever. Like, break it down into logical components. Okay. Write docs. Oh my gosh, dude. Docs. I mean, and listen, I am also an offender of this, but especially as a new contributor, we want to see how you're thinking, right? And you want to leave behind for other contributors information so they can understand what's going on. I mean, my presentation yesterday was on transactions per second, and I was talking to a developer where there were just random numbers being divided by 8, divided by 2, which had no docs in it, and we had no idea where these numbers came from, right? This is bad. We want so that, as much understanding as possible what code is being written, how you're contributing, and especially as a new contributor, how are you thinking? And this is the most important part, that code can be right, but your thinking process to get to that code, we can also mentor you on, right? That your understanding of the code, we can mentor you on, right? So this is a really great way for us to, for you to express your ideas and to express, what you're trying to implement, and of course, make our code base better. And docs exist in two places: in the code itself, but also in the PR. Never have a PR where it just says like, this thing does this, right? Never have a PR which has no comment at all. Write down in the PR what the reviewer should be walking through. Like, tell a story. You're a reviewer, I'm writing this, start here, look at this, build this, allow me to actually better understand what I'm going to expect to read before I read it, right? So it's a combination of inline and in PR documentation. And again, a big one here is that how many times as a developer, maybe reading Substrate code, have you gone back and looked at the PR to actually understand the thinking process of why code was written in a certain way, right? So that's all very important. And then finally, one thing I don't see enough is reviewing your own PR. How many times I've seen someone submit a PR that if you just opened up GitHub and looked at your own PR, you would see formatting issues, you would see commented out code, you would see like dead comments or to-dos or whatever. That means obviously you're working on some PR in multiple files. You don't remember everything you touched, right? But if you look at the actual PR itself, you could see all the things you're touching and things you need to clean up and fix, right? So as someone who reviews these codes, it's very discouraging to look at a PR and see, man, you just need to clean this up, like format it, like it's obvious. Just look at GitHub, right? You should, even before you ask someone like me or anyone else to review your code, review it yourself. Treat yourself as your own review. And another great opportunity when you review your own code is that you can actually leave comments to highlight places that you had questions on or highlight places where you think things are sensitive, right? So when you actually have a PR, you make your own comment, bam. When I'm going through your code, hey, look at this. Make sure I did it right, right? You can get that kind of highlighting in your own PR. So let's look at my own PR and let's see how I did. So first mess up. This is terrible. I mean, obviously it is an issue with text on what needs to be done, but I should probably in my PR rewrite this in my own words to describe my understanding of the issue, right? How I implement it, what I did to fix it, right? Let's look at this issue in general. Updating moment to support mul div with block number. And if we take a quick look at the files changed here, this is a good issue to pick. This issue does not touch sensitive code. It is just kind of, again, playing with types and traits. If it compiles, it's good. That's basically the high-level idea here, right? Great issue. And it's very small, localized, perfect first issue to pick, right? But again, there's not really a need in this context for more docs, right? Nothing here. But what am I missing? I'm missing tests. Even though this PR is so simple, it's just add, support this type mul in div. I can already think of 2 tests to write. One where you do mul, one where you do div. There's no reason not to write these simple tests that show, hey, this type now has these traits. And if someone removes those traits, then the tests start to fail, right? This is a very clear example where even the most trivial PR could use good tests, right? Then look at this. In my PR, I did not review it myself. I should have caught that there were spacing issues or whatever, right? I didn't format it correctly. I left a dead comment right here, right? When I submitted the PR, I didn't go back and just look at the 5 lines of code I changed to make sure I didn't have a commented code here, right? I left that to the reviewer. So that was also a mistake. But at the end of the day, I got good feedback. I learned from my mistakes, and I got it approved. That was almost 6 years ago. Right? Makes sense, right? So I did good on identifying the issue. I did bad pretty much on everything else. But it got merged in. And again, the expectation is, your first PR, I hope that we're not going to treat you hostilely, right? I think we're all in it to help you contribute, to help you come in. I think a really important philosophy for me is that I'm okay with anyone making a mistake the first time. But if you make the same mistake a second time, you're not learning, right? It should never be that I tell you twice, hey, format your code, right? The first time is no problem. But if you want to contribute to open source repos, we need to know that when we're giving you feedback, you are instilling that into your mindset. I think that's fair, right? Okay. Cool. And then, of course, if you can get that PR merged, you can also get paid, right? Without joining the fellowship, without having a job in Polkadot, that we actually have the ability to tip people on high-quality PRs, and you can make dots. You can actually get paid for what you're doing here. Now, this tip is not mandatory. You can't just make any PR and get a tip. This is up to the discretion of the owners of the repo. So in this case, the Parity core contributors. But oftentimes, if you do an issue that is significant enough, you will get a tip. So again, if you just fixed one typo, probably not going to get a tip for it. But if you can actually contribute to a significant issue, you can get anything from a small, medium, or large tip. This is 150 dot for this PR here, right? Again, up to the discretion of the code owner. And again, I don't want you to go in saying, I'm working on this issue, assuming I will get a tip. I would hope that no one ever asks, hey, can you tip me? I think that we already identify that when a PR is good, we want to encourage more PRs, that we will use tips as that encouragement, right? Yeah. And then expect chaos. So I want to show you, obviously, this is the basics of contributing to Polkadot. Can I spin this up? But, it's chaotic. I mean, we are working, in an open source, decentralized space. In order to make things like Polkadot happen, it requires the work and effort and coordination of hundreds, if not thousands of people, right? Don't expect contributing to Polkadot SDK will be easy. And I hope that's not the reason you're coming in to do it. I hope you're coming in to understand that you can be a part of a larger mission, a part of a bigger narrative, and that everyone has to start somewhere, right? It could be that the way you start contributing to Polkadot SDK is not in Polkadot SDK itself, but writing your own docs, your own tutorials, your own projects, and then once you have a better understanding, actually coming and being a part of this overall narrative, right? But yeah, I mean, I really, really hope that this enlightened you a little bit on how to navigate open source repositories, how to navigate the Polkadot SDK, who owns what, where you should go to get feedback, how you can identify different issues, and move forward. So I think we should spend this time. Who here is a core contributor to an open source repo in the Polkadot ecosystem? We have a lot of hands. Who here is brand new and wants to contribute to Polkadot for the first time? I would like, if you have, so we'll go to the first one. If you are a existing contributor, oh, let's stop this. If you are an existing contributor to the Polkadot ecosystem, is there anything that I missed that you would want to say to other people listening to this video? Does anyone have anything they want to add? Did what I say resonated? Oh, yeah, we have one back there. But in general, what I said resonate with people? I hear some nods. OK, so that's good. What would you like to say? The mic is not working.
Yeah, so the question I would be, I guess, keeping the conversations in the open, and I guess you would go through the different phases. You're a beginner, you get more advanced, you'll be exposed to certain levels of, I guess, the public communications, but there would always be those private conversations. Like, how do you know, like, how do you sort of get an idea of like whether there are other conversations that might actually be happening in private, which could actually be the difference between you having a lot of trouble tackling an issue and not.
Right. So I think you can't know what you don't know. If there's a private conversation that you're not a part of, you can't know it. And I'm not saying that private conversations are bad. In many cases, some private conversations can be a way to hash out ideas to then write a good public comment, right? You don't want necessarily confusion or have to navigate 100 lines of back and forth to just find the answer. Sometimes it can be good. But it's really the responsibility of the knowledge havers to bring that information out there. And one of the things you can do, again, when you pick up an issue, you should immediately say, you shouldn't pick up an issue in private. You should go to the issue itself and say, hey, I would like to pick this up, right? And get an acknowledgement from the issue creator, and hopefully, or even ask, is there anything else I should know before I start this issue, right? You don't want to come in and surprise, I just built this issue, I didn't talk to anyone, right? You need to communicate with the issue creator to derive any more information that's needed to then better help you actually navigate the issue. But yeah, I think that the answer to that question is you need to ask. Like, if you can't know this private conversation, you need to ask, was there more information that's not written here? And hopefully that will bring it there. And if you get an answer, let's say in a DM, of that more information, put it on yourself to bring that information to the public, right?
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah. Any more? Yeah. A comment right next to him. Yeah, please, right there. Keep your hand up.
Sorry, just a small remark.
Please.
As someone who's working closely with a higher rank member of the fellowship, I also want to point out that Polkadot SDK is a great place, but it's not the only place, and that there are other places that are very important for the ecosystem that need for more contributors. So a couple examples will be Smalldot, our light client. We definitely need more people helping out. There is the RFC8. Sorry, just going to make a small list. Sorry, there is the RFC8 that will allow us to. It's not that complicated, I believe, but I mean, just I'm front-end developer. What do I know? But like the RFC8 will allow us to connect trustedly from the relay chain to parachains, as the boot nodes of the parachains will be registering the DHT table of the relay chain. There is also, just a couple more examples, the WebRTC. Yes, there is an open PR for ages for the WebRTC. It's super complicated, but if you happen to know someone that has the knowledge to bring that home, that's a very good one. All I'm going to say is, like, just to finish this, is like, Polkadot SDK it's awesome, but there is also, it's a decentralized network. We should have decentralized projects as well, and there are some of these decentralized projects that bring a lot of value to the network that also need some love. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
I totally agree. I think the important thing, if you're navigating outside of the Polkadot SDK, that one repo, just to understand ownership again, right? Because at the end of the day, if you want to contribute, you need to get it through to a PR, to an approval. So if you're contributing, for example, to like Chopsticks, owned by like a Kala team, right? You need to go ahead and understand what their needs are, who to contact from that world, right? And then what their processes are for accepting contributions and push it through. But yeah, absolutely right. Like, I mean, Polkadot SDK is just one piece of the whole Polkadot network, and oftentimes probably not even the best place to start contributing. It is much better to start contributing perhaps in your own projects, your own like docs or little like, you know, side projects, or in other things which are kind of more front-facing to the users, right? Okay. Any more comments? Yeah, we have a comment here in the back.
Yeah. Hi, Sean.
Yes.
There are cases, there have been cases where I've seen also by fellows themselves, it's not clear what the line is between what is RFC worthy, what is not RFC worthy. So let's say we have an idea, right, that could result potentially in some work done on a, for instance, system parachain, right, like changing something in an existing system parachain. I see there being kind of the vision itself is probably not technical enough to be an RFC, but there has to be also some technical implementation which would be an RFC. And then it would also be probably a few pallets to be developed, which would be Polkadot SDK under Parity ownership. So how would you see kind of all of these things working together? It would be like, let's say, you know, how do you envision like a step-by-step guide of steps to take to get there?
At a high level, I think that falls under this common mistake, actually. The truth is, everyone has ideas. You know, I want to make Polkadot fees lower. I want to make this faster. I want to support this thing. And this is you, again, bringing your ideas to the repo, perhaps without establishing yourself as a core contributor to the repo, understanding what we're doing, what the actual mission is, right? I think that there is no excuse to not give feedback and to contribute to people who have ideas. Like, you need to, you know, have a conversation. Ideally, before you open an RFC, you open an issue and start a conversation. But the truth is, if you're at a level, for example, where you're not able to implement your idea, as sensitively as I can say it, perhaps you're not ready to have that idea because you're just having an idea in the blank without understanding technically how the system works, right? Perhaps really what you should be doing if you want to contribute to Polkadot is to learn, build up your knowledge of the code base, understand if your idea actually makes sense in that context, and when you have the ability to do it, implement it, and be the person who pushes it forward, right? I mean, give me pushback.
Yeah, you know, so even if you do have, like, let's say, if you do have, like, if you know how it would be implemented technically, there is still, you know, there's a vision part to the idea, which it's still not yet clear. Would that be part of, you know, you make a Polkadot forum post about the vision, and then you somehow define what is actually the technical details which would go in an RFC?
Yeah.
What is the part that would go in the Polkadot SDK? What are the part for which you can actually get paid for, right? Because if you make an RFC and it gets approved, then maybe you get to work on it. You might also get a treasury, you know, proposal.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. So one I want to mention here is that ultimately these repos and the fellowship is all subservient to the dot holders. So the number one way you can get your idea worked on, even against all the feedback, whatever, is to get a referendum that says, here's the ID, here's the RFC, public referendum, dot holders voting. And it should be that if the dot holders vote yes on this proposal, that is required by the fellowship to actually acknowledge and work on that idea. That is exactly the servants, the subservience to the dot holders, right? But then, of course, there's lots of ways to tackle the issue. How to make an RFC, where do the different parts go? That is something that, you know, requires discussion. And perhaps after you get that approval from the dot holders that this is the idea we want to implement, then you'll get actually the traction from the right core developers to understand how to break down that idea. But I would also say, again, if you have the idea of technically how to implement it, you should also have technically understanding of where should we split up, right? Where's that slide? That, you know, practically speaking, it shouldn't be that you are building an issue that you don't know how exactly, again, it's going to be implemented, right? That's where, you know, someone just says, I want to support 1 trillion NFTs. Like, but technically how in a Merkle tree, right? Like, do you have enough knowledge of that code base and the structures and technicalities of the stuff, right? So I think you need to talk to right people, get the information, educate yourself to be able to have all those answers. Does that make sense? I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a fair response. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I don't want to take too much time if someone else has other questions. I feel there's like, especially for, so you can still come up with like a vision and the technical details to implement that vision. But before, at least what I've seen, before making it an RFC, there has to be some kind of discussion before making like directly the RFC, right? And that would be on the forum where the dot holders participate, right?
Okay.
So. Yeah,
I agree that you should.
Because I thought I took your words as you have an idea and the and you know how to technically do it. Open an RFC, but we've seen that opening direct an RFC is not the best.
You're correct. You need to propagate that idea. You should know. Like, this is my feeling. If you're opening an RFC, you should know, because you talked to enough people, that it would pass. It shouldn't be like, oh, I wonder if the network wants this to pass or not. It should be that you put it on as a technicality. Like, I'm just going to make it through. And it should be like 100% pass, right? That's when you know you're at a good spot, right? But you've discussed with enough people, you've had their conversations, you know, that should all be part of it.
Okay, yeah, that answers.
Yeah, but but that's the thing, that I think what I would say, this is targeted towards early contributors. Once you get deeper in the ecosystem, you've established a reputation, you have the right resources. As an early contributor, it's probably wrong that your contributions will be involving an RFC. Do you understand? Like, that's a low-level protocol decision. You need to instead be picking up issues that already exist. Again, I want to make sure that you're coming to the Polkadot ecosystem. You have not made a PR to Polkadot before. The common mistake is this. I cannot overemphasize. The common mistake is that I want to build what I think is good. The truth is, you need to first understand the ecosystem, what we're actually doing here, where the future we're headed towards, right? So yeah. One more in the front, I think.
Yeah. Okay, last question.
So there's been a common issue within the ecosystem where there was, for example, an RFC from ChaosDAO to implement something.
Yeah, it was like the voting, being able to delegate vote, but then also vote on your own, right?
Yeah, but it did not have these technical insights, right? And I feel that as users of the protocol, right, is there a space for somebody to voice these concerns and maybe get somebody from the fellowship or some contributor to comment on that somewhere at least?
So I'll tell you this. The truth is, I looked at this issue very carefully myself. I wanted to implement it, and I couldn't come up with a good solution without overhauling the whole democracy system. It's quite difficult, actually, because I don't want to get into the details. If you want, I'll talk to you, but how do you say this? I think the path forward for that. So let's say there's an idea that is overwhelmingly positive. I think it's a great idea too. The idea is that I can delegate to someone, they can vote, but if I don't agree with their vote after delegation, I can change my vote. I think that this is where you should take that idea and make it a on-chain referendum vote that shows that the most dot holders want this, and then force the fellowship to really technically think about it. And again, the problem is that I think that change is going to require much bigger changes to the conviction voting system, which is beyond the scope of a single RFC, right? But that is, I think, the way forward. The way forward is that you have an idea, ChaosDAO thinks it's really good, but what do the dot holders think, right? And once you get that there, it is really, there's no excuse once dot holders have voted yes that we aren't subservient to them, right? One more comment in the back, maybe. Am I holding anyone back? No. Okay, please. Yeah.
It's kind of a follow-up to this discussion. So you said now, if you first have to see if the majority of dot holders approve the idea, and you were suggesting to basically make or open an RFC and get it through the root governance proposal, but the RFC itself is under the fellowship governance and not the majority of.
No. Actually, that's not true at all. So the fellowship governance is like a subset of the public referendum. So there are certain kinds of changes to Polkadot that are so big and impactful, we don't even put it to the fellowship, we go to the public referendum. And if you get a public referendum saying you want something, that overrides what the fellowship thinks, truthfully. So if let's say a real example, if the fellowship came up with a technical decision, let's say we don't like CoreJam, and we approve we don't like CoreJam, you as someone in the dot holder who disagrees with that vote can open a public referendum saying we like CoreJam. If that passes, that overrides the decisions of the fellowship.
Yeah, but on a technical level, what do you vote on?
You're voting on a hash of a text, It's a signaling.
That doesn't have to be the hashed RFC. It can be like a generic text or.
In general, yes. I mean.
Okay, I'm kind of familiar with that, so that's why I'm asking.
Again, this is where things get like loosey-goosey, because as we know, one of the amazing things about Polkadot is we can actually enact code changes with upgrades. But there's still a social aspect to building blockchains. At some point you just need to be able to agree on ideas that aren't code, right? And I think that this kind of signaling and using remarks and RFCs remarks, RFCs, and then public referendums is the way to do it. And again, if you're seeing that the dot holders want A and it's not being built, that's very bearish for Polkadot network, right? We are in control of the dot holders, right? Yeah.
Okay, thanks for your questions.
Thank you.
And a round of.
I'll be around outside if you want to talk more.
A round of applause for Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks for your talk.